Welcome, everyone. I am so delighted to be here with you. Um, I am Dr. Loy Parks. I am the Leadership Development and Institutional Strengthening Specialist with the Caribbean Center for Development Administration, CARICAD. And I am happy to be here hosting the last webinar that we'll be hosting for 2025. Um, and we know what we have experienced recently in my own home country, the devastation of Hurricane Melissa. And the truth of the matter is that hurricanes and other natural disasters are now very frequent occurrences, happening more frequently with much more severity. And so we at CARICAD are seeking to help to equip the region with the capacity to build its resilience, to build competencies in the area of disaster risk management. And so it is in that vein that we are hosting this particular webinar with this particular topic. Lessons from the storm, examining lessons learned from the impact of Hurricane Beryl on Grenada, and especially the part of Grenada that so many people have never been to, Carricou and Petite Martinique. And I have a guest with us, one of the long-serving permanent secretaries in the government of Grenada, Mr. Javan Williams, who will be sharing from his experiences. I will be introducing him properly later on, but it is my delight to welcome you. And if you're here for the very first time, where have you been? Our webinar series are always not only well attended, but they are very high impact. It's an opportunity for us to continue to learn and to network and to help each other to succeed, particularly across this Caribbean region and beyond. Now, to have a good learning experience in this webinar, we like to remind ourselves, and if you're here for the first time, this will be a first perhaps for you, that we want to lean in and to focus. The webinar is just an hour long approximately, and we want to get all that we can from it. So we want to remove our distractions by closing software applications on your device apart from Zoom. Mute your phones or turn the ringers down. And let your colleagues know this is your learning hour. So, you're unavailable for the next hour. Thankfully, bandwidth issues are not as big a deal as they used to be in the past, but we may still have challenges, and it might be good if you're having that challenge to plug in your internet cable. Now, in our webinar, you don't necessarily have to use your microphone, but if you wish, during the Q&A period, you want to vocalize your questions, you want to ensure that your microphone is in fact working. And of course, please feel free to use the chat feature to respond, ask your questions, and just to engage with everybody in this webinar, okay? So, I always like to find out, where are people joining us today? Where are you joining us from? So for me, I am joining from Jamaica, right? And just tell us in the chat, which country are you joining us from? We always like to know who is in the room. So Angela, welcome. She's joining us from Barbados. Stephen is joining us from Jamaica. Leah is also joining from Barbados. Heather from Jamaica. Beverly from the BVI. Yes. Christine from the Bahamas. Good. Cecilia, one of our esteemed alumni, joining us from Dominica. Notice that joining from the Nature Isle, that's Dominica. Roxy, another alumni, joining us from Grenada. Welcome, PS Roxy. Also want to welcome especially Alison Miller. She is an associate consultant and executive coach with CARICAD, but a retired permanent secretary and esteemed alumni from the cohort 1 of our leadership development program. Welcome. Vincent joining us from BVI. Philip. No, I have not seen this name in a long time. Philip. No, Philip, I have to allow you to unmute. Philip is joining us from Ghana. So, Philip, I have to allow you to just say greetings from Ghana. Philip, I'm inviting you to unmute. How are you, Philip?
Yes, I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Philip, I have to say, I am fascinated. What prompted you to register for our webinar from Ghana?
Oh, I have always been interested in issues concerning hurricanes. So,
Yes,
uh, I also joined you on the youth development. You remember the
yes.
the program that was hosted by Barbados.
Great. Philip, it is
Yeah,
good to hear your voice again after many years, and so good to have you. You know,
thank you very
I
much.
always joke with my African brothers and sisters that if you know anything about how hurricanes form, they form off the coast of Africa and come across.
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to give us some different gifts. We need some different gifts from Africa.
Yes. Yes,
But
we wish we could, but as it
yeah,
is,
it's out of your control.
uh,
All right. Great to have you, Philip. Really good to
thank
have
you.
you. All
Thank you.
right.
Mhm.
So, um, and I see some other names here that I recognize. Quite a few of you are persons who have done our programs in the past. Wendell and Tasha, thank you all so much for being here. So, before we have our guest, and there's that image from the scene after the impact of Hurricane Beryl. And so the truth of the matter is our guest is not the only one who has learned lessons. And really this is an opportunity for us to collaborate together to share common experiences and maybe not so common experiences. And so the question I would ask you, have you been through a hurricane? And I think knowing the names, most of the names here, almost all of us have been. Or if not a hurricane, maybe it's some other form of disaster, man-made or natural. And I'm curious, and you can share in the chat, or if you wish to put up your hand, you can do so and we can unmute you. What lessons have you learned from your own experience of either hurricane or any other disaster that you have had the misfortune of going through? What lessons have you learned? And I give you a moment to think about that and to type your thoughts in the chat. What lessons have you learned? And while you're thinking about that, I think I could probably share my own lesson. And certainly the lesson that I learned is that preparedness matters, you know, being prepared, following the instructions of the various government agencies. Being prepared matters, but preparation is not only physical, it is also mental. That I think is one of the lessons. And so Cecilia also agrees with me that preparedness is key. And I know Cecilia from the Nature Isle, a very great example of a country that really bounced back after Hurricane Maria in 2017. Marie says, don't take life for granted and value the small things in life and be thankful for everything in life. Indeed, indeed. Marsha, welcome. And so Marsha is my great friend and colleague from the BVI. And she says she experienced category 5 hurricanes, Irma and Maria. So they got double trouble in 2017. And she learned about the resilience of people, the ability to unify and to spring together to rebuild. Yes. Maurice says, being prepared mentally and physically was a lesson that he learned as well. Philip is saying experience Hurricane Ivan. So did I. Yes, category 4 it was. I learned a lot about institutional networks and policy responses. Indeed, and those are some of the things we are going to be exploring, from a personal leadership perspective in this webinar, you know, basically all of the above. And what is it that we have learned? Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, we can no longer, I believe, in this region, continue to think that every now and again, every 10 years, or 20 years, we can expect a big thing. No, it could literally be every year. So we think about what happened in Jamaica. Last year was impacted by Hurricane Beryl, and this year, yes, just a year later, impacted by Hurricane Melissa, perhaps one of the most powerful storms we have seen. And so, before I introduce our speaker, and especially for those who may not be as acquainted with our work here at Carricou, who are we and what do we do? The Caribbean Center for Development Administration is an arm of CARICOM. We've been in existence 45 years, and we exist to support member states in the area of public sector transformation. And we do so mainly through providing technical assistance and capacity building in a number of areas that are listed on the slide here. And these include organizational development and design, human resource management and development, leadership development, strategic planning, RBM, business continuity planning, monitoring and evaluation, governance and policy, and the list goes on. And our work is guided by our Caribbean Public Service Charter, which is a conceptual framework, a common one, to guide not only our work, but is a toolkit for our member states to harmonize their public transformation processes. And if you want to learn more about this charter, as well as all the range of tools that we have developed and services that we provide in these areas, please do visit our website at www.carricou.net or email us at info@carricou.net. So again, this is that picture. And so I want to introduce to you somebody who I'm happy to say, is my friend. I met Javan first when our leadership program started. It was then under the Caribbean Leadership Project, and we were in the very first cohort. Javan, Alison Miller, who is here, and myself were in the very first cohort. And Javan is currently permanent secretary in a fairly new ministry in Grenada, the Ministry of the Blue Economy and Marine Affairs, right? He has served as permanent secretary for many years, and he holds a master's degree where he studied in Australia, University of Sydney. He has a master in project leadership. He has a Bachelor of Laws. His first degree is in the area of industrial and systems engineering. He started off his career as a teacher. He really has had a very far-reaching career. He has served as director and president of the board of the Ariza Credit Union. And so Javan comes with a wide range and depth of leadership experience. And why he's here with us? And Javan, you can start to just unmute and to turn on your camera. At the time when Hurricane Beryl hit Grenada and particularly impacted Carricou and Petite Martinique, he was permanent secretary for Carricou, Petite Martinique. And so had the distinction of leading the charge, the preparation, and perhaps even more challenging, the recovery. The recovery. And not to say everything has gone perfectly, but I can honestly say that there, in many ways, the recovery was much speedier, much more efficient than anybody could have anticipated. And so I invited Javan here today to really just to share from his experience as a permanent secretary, leading the charge in the disaster response. And what were the challenges? What was it like? Not just as a leader, but as a human being, right? And what were some of the challenges that they had to overcome, especially in the recovery phase of the operations? And probably more importantly, what are the lessons learned? What are the things that went well? What are the things you say, okay, now we're learning, we need to do these things better? Because we believe that these are lessons not only for Grenada, but for the entire region and even beyond, small island developing states. There are other states like the Philippines that are constantly bombarded by these kinds of disasters, and we can always learn from these lessons. So, Javan, welcome. Thank you so very much. I know you're so busy, but I really appreciate you making yourself available. All right. Thank you so much. So, Javan, the first question, and it's an interview format that we are going to be using here. All right. So, here is the first question that I have for you. And then maybe not a question, but I just wanted to just give you that space to just kind of share, just share from your heart, just overall, what was the experience like? What was the experience like from a leadership perspective? Everybody's looking to you. Storm coming, and afterwards, place is destroyed. They're looking to you. Tell us about it.
Well, good morning, Dr. Bax. Good morning to everybody online, and thanks for the opportunity for sharing this morning. To go straight into the meat of the matter, from the time we follow in the methodological statements that the hurricane will more or less center itself directly in the path of Carricou and Petite Martinique, the mental preparation started. Because
Yeah.
being a student of geography and somebody who like to look at those kind of specific location points, I realized that we were going to be seriously impacted. So I mentally, I realized that it was going to be a lot of work to do. So the first order of the day was trying to convince persons that this thing is going to be pretty serious and people have to plan accordingly. So down to the point of the weekend, I took on my own and made a few pass around the island to see how people are taking this warning. Some people at the last minute had to be kind of urged to prepare. And on the disaster management side of things, we have a shelter in Carricou. NADMA, Grenada, has the National Agency for Dealing with Disaster. And checking the preparation, because the PSs of the Ministry of Carricou and Petite Affairs is part of the planning group. So on the Friday, being part of that meeting to lock down what are all of the specific things we have in place for dealing with disaster, here it was revealed that the planning and the procedures are there, but the human resource capacity started to become absent.
Yeah.
Simply because some people start to see how serious it was. They would have done all the training, who has to be shelter manager, who has to be logistic persons, and they agreed, they volunteered, the name is there, but we had names, we had nobodies. So immediately, the
Yes.
situation started to become a little bit more tenuous to deal with. I didn't make it be a daunting matter. I would have briefed a number of persons in the ministry on the situation. So the minister was pretty involved from the beginning, so he was on top of things. We keep him appraised. And I decided to work on some contingencies. So having the position of the PS, it gave an advantage at that stage. So I being a person of the community, teaching, a lot of the young workers now are persons I would have taught. If it wasn't them, um, I'm in good friends with their parents. So I contacted quite a few of the machine operators and the guys who deal with constructions and cleaning. I put my own contingency plan just in case. Um, so that was the starting point. So the position gave an advantage in terms of preparing persons mentally, what will happen, how you can support the ministry or support the islands in the event that something happens. So that is more or less a synopsis from that first point.
All right. So the hurricane hits. And before I even get into the leadership response, I know not taking your business out, but I know you personally, your family was affected, in terms of destruction of property and so on. How do you handle the fact that you're now leading the charge? Everybody's looking to you. And now but it's hard for you you can't simultaneously, focus on your own home and deal with, everybody else. How did you manage that? And how did you create that balance for yourself?
Well, I had to weigh the psychological impact along with the societal presumptions to take a decision because I was personally impacted, as you said. My mom's house was totally decimated. Brothers, siblings, same. But what do? You're in charge of the situation. People are turning to you. You're impacted. Should you sit and worry about your loss or your specific family loss, or should you use that as an advantage? So noting that I had a contingency plan for helping with the cleanup, noting that we were short on persons who have to take the responsibility to assist in the disaster, I analyzed the situation and decided, no, okay, I had a chat with family and close friends. This is where we are. We can't sit and force over the issue, so we have to get up and get. So I immediately use close friends and family to bring in as a stopgap for helping manage and control. And noting that it was going to be easier for me to give directions and guidance to them and with less stress on myself dealing with other matters and knowing that they will execute what they're asked to do. I immediately pull these people around and gave specific responsibility. So with my limited knowledge that I would have done in disaster management as a course in Australia, recall what is expected, pull persons, put them in groups, who is going to be responsible for managing the disaster relief when it comes in. So put a team on the port. These are your responsibilities. From my home, we were able to pull some notebooks and pens and things so we could do the recording and be accountable. Again, in small societies, you put your family, persons would say you take advantage of the situation. So immediately you had to have accountability from the start. So I had key persons in place to make sure that they execute. The first day of the storm, the intention with a conversation with the minister, because we slept in the disaster room the night. So in briefing the minister, we discussed with the team that the contingency plan I have, when the disaster pass, will go out, try to get to these people because communication was down, and make sure persons were coordinated to do the cleanup. So we strategized there and then, and decided that we must clear the path first to the senior citizen home, because we have a home where we know we have some elders and we would want to know if they're okay. Second, we have to go to the hospital, make sure that there was thing. And third, to the airport, and the port to the fort. So these 4 areas, we went out the evening and we were able to complete 90% before 12 o'clock at night. So by almost midnight, we were able to drive to the port. We were able to access the senior citizen home, the hospital, and health. So with that done, the machine operators were doing that part to get things going. And we were able to move the seniors to safety by early morning the next day. So everybody kind of bunkered down that first day. Early morning the next day, we moved them. We were able to get to the port to operate and started communication. But I must mention though, what was a little bit challenging is the fact that when we got out, we had sat phones. One of the sat phone was working, one wasn't working. The communication was sporadic, so somebody will get you, don't get you. So we were more or less cut off from mainland Grenada. We could not have gotten contact with mainland Grenada. But as God would have had it, there were some storm chasers coming through. So when the disaster subsided, they came close to the disaster management shelter where we were and asked if how things going and if we need to make any contact. So I had asked for communication. They put up a Starlink connection and we were able to get WhatsApp. So I immediately called the CAPSEC and explained to her what is the situation at hand. We know current is going to be off for a long time. We know we have to move around a lot. So we know we're not going to get fuel. One lone gas station on the island, cut off from electricity, no movements for the big truck, so you can't get fuel. So request was made for some key strategic processes and systems to put in place, which was done swiftly. So by the end of the first week, we had those things through the Cabinet Office and the disaster support from Grenada. We had a fuel truck came up with a tank to station at the disaster location in Carricou, so we could have kept the action going. And we started to take management from there. So a few days after CDMA came, so we were doing our own controls, absent from Grenada, minister leading the charge. And 2-3 days after the Prime Minister came, and the Prime Minister was very hands-on in making sure that things are in place, because the first day and a half they weren't able to communicate with us. Grenada was wondering, well, what happened? And they couldn't at the same time because the weather was bad in terms of the sea. So they couldn't even say, let's take a boat and come up until the water subsided. So the first 3 days we were able to actually manage and move things going. So mentally, I would suggest to everybody, when these things have to come, you would plan, you would have things in place, but when the reality strikes some people and the emotional part gets on things and persons decide they can't move, then you have a problem. So as leaders, what I learned is social capital. The more social capital you have, is the easier you're able to manage things in those kind of impending disasters, because that's what worked in Carricou and Petite Martinique. You were able to reach out to some persons, you were able to explain. And I must add here also, compliments to the staff. Being a PS, and I guess either with the respect or sometimes it could be fear, God knows. But the staff were very, very cooperative. I mean, a lot of people was impacted, but I had asked them just the same, listen, we have a responsibility to lead. Let us come out and lead, organize ourselves, and then we'll take care of ourselves when the island is settled. Because if everybody are individually trying to reach out on their own, then that doesn't help. So I suppose that was the general picture that I disseminated. Who works with government? Who has the potential to assist? Let us come out and manage this thing. And when things settle, we see what systems in place to help you recover. So I'll stop it.
Yeah. All right. No, I mean, there's so many nuggets in what you're saying. The importance of social capital, the fact that, people who it might not be your job role, but you can easily get, you know, pulled in onto the team, and perhaps the need for, you know, even more widespread training of persons, even if you don't think under normal conditions, you don't see them as, likely to be frontline responders, part of the response team. But literally that can happen quite easily because, in a case of it, it's kind of all hands on deck, The other thing that, and I want you to explore a little further, maybe in terms of lessons, because certainly I have seen that here in my own country, Jamaica, with Hurricane Melissa, and the importance of the communication system and the challenge of not having, the communications to actually, reach out to get the help or to know who needs help. What you think is a lesson going forward in terms of, is there a way that you think we ought to proactively put in place mechanisms to ensure continuity of communication in times of disasters?
Well, that was a serious lesson for me because even now, the support mechanism that came around, I would have suggested a device that I know a couple volunteers are trying to put in place. Because we had a radio communication system that used this transmitter thing, but the old VHF system that the boatmen use, you don't really need so much of because they use the signals, the radio signals. That transmitter system failed within the first few hours. That is why we had no communication whatsoever.
Yeah.
So imagine the next day, I asked one of the security officers to accompany me to a home because prior to moving around the weekend, I saw a young man, a boatman with a handheld radio that I realized was up to standard. So I went to his home. We had to climb over all the rubbles to get to the home of that young man and told the family that we are here to commandeer the radio. So we actually took the radio, went back
Yes.
to went back to the disaster shelter. There was a communication guy there who had some knowledge. So there was a radio station in Carricou that you do a lot of communication. We presumed that they would have some old equipments. So we sent there to look at what they had in the storage
Yes.
and rebuild one of the old VHF system. And that is how we were able to communicate with the Maurice Bishop International Airport via that system. And in
Yes.
turn, Maurice Bishop would have patched us in now to the disaster office in Grenada. And that is what started to smooth out some of the communication. But locally and ground, it is very important that the people, to control people, you want them to understand a level of assurance. In other words, you create some genuine hope for them to kind of support you or at least wait on something. Otherwise, it could lead to another chaos in itself, another disaster in itself, which is human disaster. So we would have sat in the evening time and craft messages. So we use the government vehicles. We put a broadcasting system on it, and we would have craft messages, record the messages, and we would move morning and evening around the island, especially into the far-reaching areas, and broadcast to the people. This is what is happening. This is where we are. This is what is going to be coming. So have some patience and organize. So we did that consistently for at least a month
Yeah.
until the communication with telephones and other things came up a little bit more, and then to move forward. Added to that, when CDMA came and then we had the other international volunteer groups coming in, one of the first things was when the Guyanese came in also, the Guyanese government military people came in. One of the first things we asked for them to concentrate on was to help one of the local radio stations to be back up as soon as possible.
Mhm.
So a lot of efforts went into that. And then while we're going around the broadcasting, we would have gotten that radio station to come up. When it came up, it wasn't reaching in certain areas. So we still had to continue the broadcasting, but at least at a minimal level now. We don't have to go as far as much as. So we just had to go to the further end where the radio station was the thing. So communication is very, very vital in having this thing happening. And I want to always reiterate, in situations like his people, you need to let people know you have a lot of naysayers. You'll have a lot of misinformation and sometimes intentional, sometimes not. So you can't concentrate on the negatives. You have to concentrate on keeping people at bay and making sure that they have information, right?
Yeah.
That is what we did. And then when we started to organize the relief mechanism, then persons knew when the vehicles are passing where. And so the trucks was going around and doing delivery, so they knew what was happening. Added to that, when we discussed with the Prime Minister, there's some real far-reaching areas that the trucks could have never gone still at the time because the roads were passable, but still not wide enough for some of the big trucks. So the government of Grenada decided to send some pickups.
Right.
So they sent a number of pickups. So we had a list of these areas where the trucks couldn't have gone. So the pickups were actually going into those far-reaching areas, stopping at certain points, and have persons walk into the community and make sure people have some basic food and water. So that I think helped a lot with the communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And folks, I did put in the chat, but if you have comments and questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or to even raise your hand. We are going to be soon, coming into, discussion, question and answer period. But we're even now, if you have questions, please do put them in the chat. We want this to be a discussion that we have together. Javan, talk to me almost as if you're doing a um, recovery effort coordination 101, right? Speak to me because obviously coordination is critical. Coordination of personnel, resources, managing the communication, dissemination, distribution. Different partners are coming in, military from overseas, SEDEMA, others as well. You know, people just volunteering. I've seen a lot of that, and it's wonderful, but can be an absolute mess and confusion, right? And so, speak to me. Like I say, it's almost like you're doing a master class. What are the key things and elements to have effective coordination and collaboration in the recovery period?
Well, pivotal, the most important is to make sure you have an inventory of who is there and why are they there. So that the first thing, you have the list of persons coming in, why are they coming in, what they are doing, because you don't want duplication of efforts. Second to that, you have to have accountability. So the different entities that were there, we had what we call the debriefing session. So every single person that was there, the list was there, you have to report at the headquarters on a daily basis and give a report of what you are doing. And before the meeting close, everybody have an understanding of what each other is doing the next day. Right?
Yeah.
So that was very important for making sure you have an understanding what's going on and you don't create chaos or confusion on the ground. Additional to that, after that meeting, our technical meeting would say for ourselves what we see as loopholes, what we need to improve on at the close of the day. But first thing in the morning, before we move out, we had another meeting planning to move out for the next day. So there was these two sets of meeting that went on simultaneously for the first 2 months, basically. Then we started to reduce the intensity of the meetings. So we could have a handle on who is doing what, the recording. And through the CDMA process, you have to have this accountability framework where you list and record everything. So when these people came in, they helped the structure quite a lot to make sure that we kept controls of what is happening on the ground. So that was pretty important. Right.
Right. Also, as a part of the whole thing to do with the disaster recovery, beyond the clearly, you have to restore light, restore the roadways, restore the water supply, get the schools back out, repaired and reopened and all of that. What were some of the government policy responses to assist citizens, for instance, whether it is with homes, whether they have to be relocated or repairs, or, for businesses to restart? What were some of the policy responses?
Well, on the business sector, because when the communication became a little bit more up and the Prime Minister visiting, there was a number of meetings held with members of the community. So the business sector and the interest groups were met with on numerous occasions. This is where we had this what is intended, and this is what government is going to give us support. So some policy decision from the cabinet level was taken to give businesses some assistance in terms of release from taxes and so on, so they could get items getting to the people faster. The government would have taken a decision to give persons some material assistance in terms of how you can do some repairs and so on. And persons who were totally disseminated, data were collected in terms of where you are, what you are, and how you could get some assistance to build back. So the government developed this program they call the Build Back Better Homes. So there was some criteria agreed on. So you look at persons based on seniority, gender, with children and so on, before first preference, and then you move accordingly. So that is what kept things going. But for that to work, there was a lack of trust within the system because the ministry building was destroyed. The communication towards the financial operations for the ministry that was not intact. So by the end of August, though the relief mechanism started to go pretty smoothly, people started to get a little bit more settled. But what was lacking is the government administrative structure.
Okay.
But I must mention though, I should have said before, when as part of the strategic plan, when the military from Guyana came in, we had a four-prong approach for concentration because the military came, they didn't want to just go and just do everything crazy, so they wanted to know what should they focus on to start with. So with discussion again with the entire team, minister and everybody, we looked at making sure the first priority should be security. Where the security personnel was housed, that was the roof gone, everything. So that concentration on security. The second measure was health. So make sure the health centers, the clinics, the hospital, at least you could put it into functionality. So that was done. And the third measure was looking at the government administrative building. For something to happen, government has to have a place to function. And then the fourth measure were the schools.
Yes.
Right? So that four-prong approach is what was concentrated on in a methodological way. So then at the end of the day, as systems go, you start going. But while that was going on, the administrative building that were being repaired, the logistics for communication in that building would have taken us a longer period of time. So there was another government building that was partially damaged. There's a downstairs, the roof, partially the roof gone. It was a library really. So we had to gut that library, put everything on the outside. I spoke with the staff. I said to them, well, we'll have to have a kind of family set up. I contacted again Social Capital, some persons out of Digicel. That's one of the communication provider.
Right.
Work for business. I said, listen, we have to get the system network. We have to get phone line back up and running. And I need to get the financial system working. Because again, from citing the documentations in disaster management, the faster you become close to normal is the easier you're going to control the populace.
Yeah.
So we had people working. We were asking people to work. July went, August gone, September started, people started getting reluctant because people start seeing now, I am working, how am I getting compensated? So we were able to network the downstairs with support of these people from DSL and the Ministry of ICT Grenada. Guys came up with network. We asked them to put a relay system. And we were able to get connected back up with our financial system to be able to print checks, to be able to call Grenada, to be able to do everything. And I think that is what made it very easy. And from there, we were able to move. So while the government pronounced its packages for assistance, people had an office to come to. They could have spoken to somebody. They could have gotten something in writing. They could have gotten something passed on to somebody else to say, okay, I have permission for XYZ. So
Yes.
that in itself helped settle the system very, very fast. When we were able to get an administrative hub to work from, as the ministers refer to it, that was his engine room. Because
Yeah.
there was something there to deal with the populace. So there and then my role as PS kind of subsided now with the disaster management part of things, and I went back more into the administration of things. So I had this dual role in helping to bring the recovery at the pace at which you saw it went.
All right, thanks. Now, there are a couple of questions in the chat already. And so the first question is from Sharon Martin, my dear colleague from the Bahamas. And she is asking a simple question: what's the population size? And I think this would be really referencing, I guess, Carricou and Petite Martinique.
Total population is just about 7,000.
Okay.
Some recordings would give variance in 7, 8, but it's just about 7,000.
Okay. And the next question in the chat is from Philip. And he said, I've heard your brief about Sedima coming in after the event. And so his questions are: what role did Sedima play in the pre-event period? What other help did they offer in the recovery process? And was this a part of an agreed regional framework?
Well, in the pre, reviewing your structure, your processes, your plans, and so on, there were questions with not only the CDMA, but other agencies to make sure that the disaster management headquarters is prepared and ready. So they would have done that. And when they came in the actual process, they were able to come with the recording process, the way you account for the relief and support, the way you organize and strategize for communication and things. They were able to come in and help us put it in a more structured way. Not only that, I think it brought in a sense of assurance to the people, because as mentioned earlier, when I did not have the help and support, I pulled the, the people around me that could have done.
Yeah.
So there was some mistrust. But when CDMA came in and brought in I think it's a CLS system, they have a data management system for putting in information. They were able to say to persons, the only thing that was missing in the beginning from what we implemented was the technology to put it in the system. Everything that we had recorded, the way they wanted it was on paper. They could have seen everything, what comes in, how it goes out, the accountability, and they just had to put it in the system. So that in itself brought a level of comfort and belief in what we were doing were correct. So CDMA presence was highly important in making sure that the structures were there to continue.
Okay, fantastic. And so, Javan, they say hindsight is 20/20 vision. And so, from the vantage point of, having gone through the experience after the fact, looking back, and if you had the opportunity, to prepare, for such a disaster in the future, what are the critical lessons learned? And that includes what needs to be done differently, or what new needs to be done, or what was done well that you would say, yes, we need to repeat and strengthen that.
Well, if I have to go back from the support from mainland, something that needs to be rethink is the expectation for when something happens on the islands that you want to keep the control hub on the mainland.
Yeah.
Because one of the setback that we had was when the boats were coming in with relief items to support, the instructions, when they communicate with mainland, the instructions were that you come to mainland, you do your deliveries, you do whatever, and then it is transmitted to Carricou. But knowing the geography, some of these boats were coming from the north. So you're asking them to pass Carricou, go to Grenada, and then come back to Carricou, which didn't make logical sense to me. So what I would have done for some of the persons who were communicating with us when we got our radio system going, I would have been given instructions to come straight to Carricou. Eventually, mainland supported it because it makes much more sense. So in our planning, in retrospection in our planning, that is something I need to look at. Where information are going to be, where materials are going to be stored and disseminated from, what are the alternative logistical arrangements you need to put in place and not hard and fixed to one expectations, because the reality don't make the expectation work most of the time. So we have to be able to be much more flexible to put alternative systems in place for those things. What worked well, and I hope everybody do it, what worked well is the leadership. The leadership of the country, starting from the Prime Minister, hands-on from day one. And I think that sends a serious signal for everybody. Listen, you are not alone. The big players are supporting you. They're on the ground, they are checking. So that is something I'll ask everybody to replicate. If you have genuine leadership being disseminated or portrayed by your leaders, it is easier for things to happen.
Yeah.
Another point I'll make, you must plan help you, but you have to remember to have a plan for the plan that does not work. Because in our case, you have to tap in on your intuition, you have to tap in on your own experience, you have to tap in on the way people expect you to lead. You have to be able to take decision on the fly. Because if persons lose respect or they lose belief in who is taking the charge, it can become chaotic. And some of the collaboration between agencies and entities, and that is locally, not so much for the international partners, there needs to be some more in-depth analysis on how this collaboration should work to make things go smoother for implementation. So that is my assessment thus far.
And that last point, you want to expand on that for us further?
Well, if I need to expand using the greater context, we have the disaster management unit, but there are other interest, or should I say, line agencies or ministries. For instance, the Ministry of Health. Carricou being a ministry for itself, but you have line ministries. You have the Ministry of Health, you have the Ministry of Education, right? You have National Security. You may have the Ministry of Finance. So everybody has their part. The Ministry of Economic Development, they have their part to play in the disaster. For instance, Ministry of Social Development. So everybody has their part to play. The disaster comes, social development, for instance, may need to come with therapy. They may need to come with the counselors. You may have national security might give the instructions of how things come in and out of the country. But the disaster plan, they are done as collaborating agencies. But how do you execute on a particular event? I'm not too sure if that is discussed and roll out. Because sometimes one agency might say, okay, they should have the lead on this. But the reality on the ground, the way they approach it may create a conflict. And
Right.
because they feel they may have the lead, they may not listen to the person on the ground because they will feel that that is their responsibility. So
Mhm.
this is what I'm looking at for disasters in big countries. How is it that the agencies have a system impact for everyone to collaborate on an issue without going above your role or crossing the role in a sense, but it will be accepted by everybody? I'm not too sure if that was clear in our case, and I think there's a place that needs a lot of improvement.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's such a reminder of some of those core themes that we cover in our leadership programs. As simple as it sounds, it's about actually listening. Are you really and truly listening? Because listening is an important tool for monitoring and evaluating what's really happening. And so even as you have your plans that you're executing, you have to be getting that feedback. You have to be listening to that feedback and be adaptable enough to make adjustments when you recognize from the feedback that yes, you had a good plan, you thought, but we have to adjust. We have to make a different arrangement. Maybe somebody has to take the lead here as opposed to what we had planned originally, because that is what is going to make sense given the realities
Yeah.
on the ground.
Mhm.
And so, folks, we still have time for
Mhm.
more questions and more comments on these issues. There's another question, Javan, and it's something that is plaguing us. No, Mark, Jamaica is a larger country, a much larger area, that has impacted by this disaster of, Hurricane Melissa. But one of the challenges we're having is the whole business of procurement in the
Mhm.
recovery phase. Lots of things had to be procured, and they had to be procured very quickly. you
Mhm.
know um and I know in most countries, there are, emergency procurement procedures, etc. And even with that, there seems to be sometimes still hiccups in terms of efficient procurement to meet a disaster recovery need. What are your own perspectives on this? What should be done? What was done? What do we need to do going forward?
Well, in the Carricou perspective, Carricou Military has its own budget. And though in a disaster, you have to do the pool of the national response. But
Mhm.
there were a lot of decisions, as I mentioned, when the ministry was up and running in the financial sector. Basic items that is of need, the ministry took the responsibility to procure. With the quantity would have come when the national response kick in. But there were some persons, like, so for instance, there were some persons who had to get some assistance with that these diabetic injections and so on that they have to get.
Mhm.
That is a health issue. That might be a national procurement issue. The Ministry of Health is responsible. But when that came to our attention, we took an administrative decision to get the
Yes.
basic quantity needed now. The remainder will come for support as you go. So sometime in management, the leaders themselves would have to do the assessment because yes, you have your financial rules and regulations to be accountable for, and you have your processes. Most of these processes, some of them are tied in policy. But in a disaster, I think people should concentrate more on the law and not policy, because policy can't supersede law. So if you know as a leader you have the authority in law to take a decision, then the decision should be taken in the public interest, because
Right.
the ultimatum should be to make sure people are comfortable, and then they are not descending into chaos. That is what should be the ultimate decision-taking process for anything that is required. So that would be my suggestion. Respond
But
to that.
even listening to your response, Javan, and thank you for that, it also means that the ministry had the administrative capacity to know where to purchase these injections from. Um, it suggests it's a little bit more than using the authority to make the emergency purchases, but it was also knowing you have to gather that information to know there was this need and know how to meet that need. You get what I'm saying? And
Yes, yes,
you
yes,
might be
yes.
taking it for granted,
Yeah.
but I'd want to highlight
Um,
that it's not just you purchase. You clearly there was a needs assessment that had to be done to say this is one of the emergency needs that is here right now, and knowing how to address that need.
and excellent point, because that is exactly that's what we knew, because we had the assessment teams coming in, they were on the ground. So the people doing the housing assessment, before they went out, we let them know, listen, you're going to do a housing assessment, but that doesn't stop there. You would do a side assessment for other things. Same thing, we had the social development people going out and do the social assessments in terms of where, the persons who may need senior assistance, medical assistance, and so on. But we had advised each group, you have your concentrated form that you have to work on, but at the same time collect side information. So when persons reported every evening, we could have known where the dire need is. So if we know we have
Yes.
3 seniors that need the injection, we have 2 children that need some kind of um, pump or so, then we reach out wherever we could have gotten it as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So when that assessment go back now to the general people who has to work on it, they will do the bulk procurement. But the immediate
Right.
need was taken care of by the ministry.
Okay. Thank you so much. There's another question in the chat from Philip. Were communities given room to put into effect their local plans? And so I guess in your context, the local plan would be the local plan for Carricou and Petite Martinique.
Yes, as I mentioned in the beginning, the disaster management unit had its local plan properly organized, and I think the only hiccup is you couldn't find the bodies to execute the plan. So you had the different community leaders identified, they had their role clearly articulated, but because of the fear, I suppose, or maybe the shock of the issue, you couldn't find them to do anything. So you actually had to get somebody else
Yeah.
to fill in the role. So the plan was there, but the execution, everything fell basically on the ministry for the first 2 months
Mm.
with the support of the disaster management units.
That's an excellent point, that we have to think about. And maybe one of the lessons learned is that even as you identify people and you train people, part of that training is to also let's address the very real issue that, the reality of a disaster can bring fear. How do you deal with that? Because it's really not much sense, we train people and then
You
they
can't get them.
disappear out of fear, and also, clearly we have to think about contingencies and contingencies for the contingencies as well.
Yeah. A suggestion for that, I'm not sure it will work. It could be a kind of elaborate thing to plan logically, but a suggestion for that, your key persons for your plan execution, the system should have data on them and their immediate concerns. So in the
Yes,
event, you ask them to come in and you assure them that somebody is addressing the immediate concern, so they could concentrate on what they were trained to do and not so much
yeah,
worried about the immediate concern. But the
yeah,
logistics on that could be very humongous. But it's something that could be approached.
yeah, indeed, indeed. Just checking, we still have a few more minutes. And so if there are other questions and comments, we can certainly pose them. There's another here from Philip. He said, this particular question is academic. As we have been responding to hurricanes and associated disasters over the decades, I would be very pleased to know if there are any opportunities for modeling the likely impacts of different categories of hurricanes?
Well, that one is academic for real, but from my observation, from what I saw, I am not too sure how much modeling we can get, how much information we can get to prepare. Because you were told a category 3, 4 might hit Caribou. The books or the academics may have certain reaction or expectations in such a category. But my observation from what I saw, I am not too sure we could model this or we could prepare for this. Because there was some tornado winds activity that I saw. And from an engineering perspective, you could prepare as much as you want. If one of those things hit you, you're going to have damage.
Yeah,
You're going to have damage.
yeah. Thank you for that perspective. Philip, that is something that has come up, and you know, while I hear what Javan is saying, and there's some truth to that, but I do not know that we are, from a strategic planning and disaster risk planning perspective, we're really using the research facilities that we actually have available as we ought to. So at University of the West Indies, Mona, I must admit, I am not remembering the exact name of the department. I know it's headed by Professor Michael Taylor, but they have a lot of capability to do a lot of this modeling work. And the thing about it is that even as we experience these hurricanes, the experience of the hurricane actually provide serious data that we can then be using to help us to better make these kinds of predictions and planning. But yes, that is something that I think we ought to be exploring more. Jacqueline Spence Hemmings, I see your hand, and just go ahead, Jackie. Now, Jackie works with our meteorological service in Jamaica. Jackie, welcome. Go right ahead. Wait, you should be able to unmute, Jacqueline.
Yes. Hi. Good morning, Dr. Park. Good
Morning.
morning, colleagues. Yes. I was just trying to type in the chat when I heard you speaking. So it's a climate studies group, Mona, that has
Yes.
done that work, and they have a model called SMASH, very aptly named, I think, that allows you to look at historic systems, and maybe if it was a category 3, increase it to a category 5 to see, what extent of the damage, what the damage could be. So you will never get it right, but it definitely helps in, probably giving you more kind of understanding of what could really happen when you look at all your assets, what could be at risk and all of that, changing the path and everything, to allow you to look at various scenarios. So it's a very good tool. And I think right now it's available online. I think if we go on the University of the West Indies site, it is available there. But if not, you could also reach out to the physics department, in the physics department, Professor Taylor, Professor Stevenson, or some of the other persons to access that tool, because it has been showcased quite a lot. And, we have seen where it is definitely something that we should start using, even more so now for us here in the Caribbean, as we try to develop our resilience to these systems that we will have to come to get comfortable, if there's such a thing. But, well,
Yes.
not so much comfortable as in more prepared, or as prepared as we can be. So yes, but that I definitely agree, Dr. Parks, that there is Smash tool that was developed, and they have other tools too. It's something that could help in the modeling aspect that you speak of, as we try to ensure that the science informs our actions going forward. That is very, very important, that we rely more on the science to make our decisions going forward. Thank you.
Jacqueline, I was going to ask you to another question, but it's okay. I'll come back to you if we have time. I see another hand up. Sharon. Hold on. Sharon had her hand up. Let me make sure Sharon can unmute. Sharon, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, Dr. Lois. And
Morning.
this is for persons online, this may be you watch too much TV kind of stuff, but is it possible for us to have bunkers? Like how, okay, so something happens, to the President of the United States, there's somewhere or something happening, the President is sent to this so-called bunker. So is it possible for us to have, like I heard we talking, Mr. Javan talking about the medical supplies that were needed. Is it possible for us to begin to think about putting stuff aside or away someplace safe when these things, these threats are happening? The food, some kind of something. Is it a part of the thinking process of the putting an inventory of what could be needed? The people in hospital who have urgent care that they are placed somewhere. Is there any thinking going on where that's concerned?
All right. Thank you for that, Sharon. And I recognize, I mean, that's a question that might be bigger than all of us, or all of us need to also consider it, collectively. It's certainly something I have thought about. And look, I am not an expert in the area, but certainly it seems to me that part of the planning is also deciding, what are the things that can be purchased and stored, and it's going to be important how you store it, and if you need to go to the stores, how are you able to access it after the disaster hits. And of course, there are going to be some things that you cannot purchase in advance, but you have to be able to quickly do assessments and to have the arrangements in place to make those purchases and to get those things to happen quickly. But Javan, any perspective on that?
Well, our disaster structure, because based on our headquarters, and then we have the different village, or you should say, different sectors. There is a storage mechanism within the plan. So, for instance, in Carricou, the disaster management building has a storage unit that has different types of relief material that you expect you may use for a period of time. So that is within the plan. But the bigger question is you would have to have additional for when that storage is depleted. So, but for immediate use, yes, that is within our structure. Some of the basic items are inventoried and they are checked and refreshed ever so often. So you keep them there just in case you have something.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, folks, we are almost at the end of our webinar. And so, Javan, I just want to invite you maybe to take a minute. And if you were to just share some parting thought with us, some key takeaway that you have had from your own experience as permanent secretary leading this charge in that season.
Well, just to add in one other aspect, which is something we try to get rid of, the political interference. In small islands, we know how our politics are, and in disaster, that some persons try to use that for advantage. So my advice would always be when you have to be a leader in a disaster, you do what is best for everyone, and you don't get sidetracked by the naysayers or the political slangs or messages that may be out there. We know what social media is. Sometimes people give a lot of misinformation. If you know that you are correct, continue down the path of supporting. Whenever the investigation is done, as in our case, there were some external persons coming in to do an investigation based on the allegations on social media, and they found everything to be untrue. But the way it was broadcast, you really believe it was true. So my takeaway would always be just work in the interests of the people the best way you can. And if you do that, the information or the way things settle and the way you recover and the way you build back, that will speak for itself.
Okay, Javan, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to come and to share your experiences with us. We are really very grateful, and hopefully we'll have other opportunities for further dialogue on this. And so, folks, as we are winding down, we want to just ask you first and foremost to that you will look in our chat and you will see the link to our webinar evaluation poll. We believe that indeed the evaluation feedback is a gift, and we also want to know how our webinars, how useful they are, what other topics you might want us to cover in the future. And so if you just click on the link, the poll will come up. It's a very short one. And while you're doing that, we just have a few announcements, and we have a number of workshops and leadership programs that are coming up. We currently have the call for applications is still open. Registration closes December 13. Our Leading Change workshop, that's going to be happening across 4, I believe, Wednesdays in the month of January 2026. And this is it's virtual, it's a hands-on workshop. It is designed for persons who are leading complex change initiatives within their respective organizations. And this is a workshop designed to be very, very practical, and you will actually leave your workshop with a change action plan and a range of tools to actually help you to lead change in your real world context. We're going to be advertising it very, very shortly, our 6-month virtual transformational leadership development program. This is that program that is designed and targeted to prepare people for senior executive leadership, particularly in our public sector context in the region. We have some of our alumni are here in this very webinar, and they can attest to the fact that it really does equip you to operate at the senior executive level in our public services. And just following on from today's webinar, one of the things we're currently planning and we're going to be executing next year is a webinar series, which the name might change, but for now we're calling it the Leadership Essentials for Disaster Management, which is really aimed at building climate change resilience for the Caribbean region. All right. So if you look also in the chat, you can see how you can contact us, how you can follow us. Our website is Carricou.net. You can contact us at info@carricou.net. If you look in the chat, you can see where you can follow us on our range of our social media pages, including LinkedIn, Instagram, on YouTube. So please do follow us, sign up for our newsletters, etc. And so with that, folks, I just really want to thank you for your attendance, for your engagement, for the very insightful questions. Thanks once again to our esteemed Leadership Development Program alumni, Permanent Secretary Javan Williams from Grenada, for taking time out to share with us. And I know we won't have another webinar until next year. And so until then, we wish you all the best for the rest of 2025. And we look forward to continuing to serve you in 2026. Take care now.